I wanted to create a space where it felt like you were going to your friends for coffee. And there you knew you could share your stories honestly, listen with intention, and within that connection, we would learn and we would grow together. Hello, everyone. Welcome back, and thank you so much for stopping in today. I cannot wait to tell you about this week's guest. I sat down with registered life coach Lynda Hoffman. Now, her approachability and her professionalism was amazing, and it stems from years of working with clients specifically with ADHD. We chatted about the importance of creating networks of support in order to best establish strategies for productivity, reframe self-limiting beliefs, and create more positive mindsets. Lynda is married with 2 children, both diagnosed with ADHD, which gives her not only a knowledgeable viewpoint, of course, but also an understanding and an empathetic one. She is, and I quote, a political junkie who is also a passionate human rights activist. Getting to know Lynda and working with her was an absolute joy of mine, and I know you will feel the exact same way. So without further ado, here is my chat with Lynda Hoffman. Hello, Lynda. How are you?
I'm fine. Lovely to be with you, Stephanie.
Oh, I'm very, very excited that you are here, and I'm so excited to be chatting with you today. And I've gotten to know a bit about your business and in terms of the whole idea of coaching. And I would say, I mean, coaches have been around for a long time, but I think we're in a climate where I'm hearing more and more about life coaches now and sort of working with them and creating this sort of relationship and mentorship and those types of things. So I'm so excited that you're here and we can kind of dive more into what that looks like, what that means, all that good stuff. So before we get started, and how I always start things off is I would love to get to know you a bit more. So as well as the audience, of course. So where are you from? Where did you grow up?
I'm actually from Vancouver. I grew up in BC, the west coast of Canada, and I lived all over BC, but I was born in Vancouver. We moved to the Okanagan. I had the most idyllic childhood because my parents bought property right on top of Okanagan Lake. So I was literally in the lake every day. I would run out of the lake and I'd go pick carrots out of the garden, go back into the lake. It was absolutely wonderful. And then I moved to Montreal in 1981. So I've been here a very long time.
That's amazing. Oh, and I've been to the West Coast, I think only twice in my life, but I genuinely can say that both times that I have gone, I have said I don't want to leave. We have some family out in Vancouver as well as Cranbrook, and oh my goodness, like it's just, they don't realize it because it's just part of, you know, their everyday landscape, but it's to go there is just like, it's unreal. It's stunning.
It really is. And British Columbia has so many different microclimates. People aren't aware. There's actual desert in between the Rockies and the coastal mountains. This is where they grow their wine and the fruit, and it's just wonderful. And then when you go inland, you're going north to the Alaska Highway, which is where I spent many, many years. And then there's the coast, of course, on the north near Alaska. It's just spectacular and it's varied. Wonderful.
Yeah. My next question is, what Netflix, I have to stop saying Netflix because there's so many other, Amazon or Disney Plus, like there's just so many other platforms now. So what shows are you binging or have you binged recently?
Well,
I love getting new recommendations. I'm not going to lie. This is selfish on my part.
Okay. Well, I'm sure everybody else is aware of this one too, but I love The Crown, but yes. I really ate up Peaky Blinders.
Me too.
Alfie Solomon
loved it.
Alfie Solomons. I love characters. That was one of the best pieces of acting I've ever seen.
I fell in love like the first 2 episodes. I'm like, I'm in. We binged that show, I think in like a week and a half, and then it was over and I was like, no. I was sad. I absolutely loved Peaky Blinders. And for those that have not watched it, oh, good Lord, you have to. It is, the acting is it's spectacular.
It's the writing, the acting, the costumes, everything is seamless in there.
Oh, it's such a good show. Oh, yes. Okay. Again, I am a book nerd, and I would love to know either your favorite book and or a book you are currently reading. I'm of the caliber, I have many on the go. That's just how I operate. I usually have about 3 that are in process, but I'd love to hear your favorite or your current book.
Well, I hesitate to tell you because the book I'm reading may not be for everybody. There's a series by Masha Gessen. She's a journalist from Russia who had been targeted by Vladimir Putin. And she's written a book called Surviving Autocracy. And that was,
Wow.
it was about Trump and how comparing Trump with Putin. And I ate that up. She's a very courageous journalist. She's also non-binary. So she's been targeted in many ways. I shouldn't say she, they have been targeted in Russia, which is why she brought her adopted children to North America, to the US. And I'm always fascinated by courageous people and people who like to live outside that box and who are willing to speak up. I just eat that up.
That's amazing. Wow, I'll put that in our notes because I love making those recs, and I love hearing, like, again, these different narratives. So that's amazing. And last question I would ask is your favorite food, favorite dish, favorite thing.
Probably homemade lasagna.
Ooh.
Or a really big bowl of salad. Either one.
And you know what? And when you eat them together, it feels better.
Yeah. Well, my bowls of salad tend to be legendary.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So to dive right into our part of the focus series. So in terms of getting into how you arrived at your coaching business, I wanted to back up a little bit in terms of context. So can you take us through sort of how you arrived to your coaching business, or sorry, prior to how you arrived, what was your path, or was it always this way? Did you always kind of lean or no, or what was the pathway prior to this?
I think like most coaches, my path was circuitous. It was not a direct line. When I was 20, I was really interested in psychology, but mostly interested in politics. I wanted to go into law. And as many 20-year-olds make decisions, I decided, no, I didn't enjoy the prof I had in psychology, so I decided to go into politics. And I really meant to be in politics. I love law. I love history. I love all of that. And so I was working on an honors degree at McGill in political science. And I was focused on revolution, what it takes for people to change when they're in really bad situations, whether it's individuals or nations, and what kind of courage we have to draw on to make those changes. And so that really informed my coaching later.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. That's interesting. So it was kind of something maybe without knowing it at the time, but sort of that interest, or it was kind of in the background, if that makes sense, without necessarily knowing in our 20s, even in our early 30s, I would say, who knows, who knows where we're headed to going. Okay. So that's interesting. So then the idea of coaching. So for those that are not as familiar with how that would work or what that would look like, what are the pillars of working that coaching is centered around, not just for ADHD? Well, I mean, we'll get more specifically into that, of course. But on a general scale, if I want to work with a life coach, what is it? What are the goals of it in terms of how you structure it or what the idea behind it is?
I think what you're asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie, I think you're asking, what can a person expect?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Yes.
And well, every life coach is different because there's so many different ways of working, but essentially people come to coaches because they're not getting the results in their life that they want.
Okay.
And the reason people go to coaches is because humans are wired in such a way that we don't see how we get on our own way. So a coach is there to help us with the fears and the negative thinking and the self-worth issues and the patterns of behavior that are so automatic and so deeply grooved in our day-to-day. We don't see it.
Right.
So the coach is there to hold up the mirror and say, okay, I'm seeing this. What are you seeing? And so when we're starting with a life coach, we start with, what is it you want to achieve? And then we look at what's getting in the way. And we coach that. And coaching is not telling you what to do at all. The beauty of coaching is that it's drawing out of you that wisdom that you already have.
Right. No, I'm processing that. And I love that we get in our own way.
Yeah.
That is something we all do. And something that you need, I think we all need that, whether it's, and so, sometimes I'm just processing examples in my own head. So sometimes I feel like it also matters that it's an outside source. Like that matters sometimes, because sometimes our closest friends who we adore, or family, partners, whatever, sometimes they will say it. And it's not that you don't want to listen. It's just that you don't. And you just don't. And sometimes it does take an outside perspective to hold up a mirror, or just even to engage and have those conversations that you're kind of like, okay, hold on, wait a minute. Because they have nothing. I think they're not that biased sense, right? So it's like, not that you believe them more, but I don't know. It's just, it sounds different.
It's different because when your best friend or your colleague or your boss gives you feedback and says, hey, Stephanie, what about this over here? They've got a vested interest.
Right.
And so there's a relationship going on there that is going to confuse the situation. The thing about coaching is you're with someone who's outside, who's there for you. I have no vested interest in that, except to support you in finding what you need. So it takes you out of that dynamic you're in with your family and your friends and your boss, and gives you a safe space to play with that.
So this is my next question. It's kind of a two-parter. So the first part would be, how long have you been a coach? Roughly.
I became a coach 8 or 9 years ago, but I've been in a coaching career for about 15 years.
And why I asked that question is to sort of domino to the next. So can you describe some common, without, of course, personal detail or anything like that, but I mean some common feelings, patterns, challenges that clients have come to you with? And what I'm hoping by that is that there are hopefully people listening that may be feeling isolated or unmotivated or very disenfranchised, again, whether that be for ADHD, because that's what we focus on in this series, but or not, that feel that maybe they're beyond help. They don't know how to seek, they don't understand what they're feeling, and that creates obviously more feelings of isolation. So can you describe in your experiences some of what those traits might be for people to kind of connect with, hopefully?
Okay. If I'm not saying it in a connecting way, let me know.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Fear.
Okay.
Fear, despair, frustration. Those are the feelings. And the patterns are unique to the individual, but usually it's like, I've worked with professionals doctors, lawyers, who come to me in tears and said, I don't do my taxes. I don't do my billings. I am constantly behind. I don't know how to get on top of it. I want to be with my kids. I feel like a fraud because I'm scared someone's going to find out I'm not really a full human being, or I'm not a full adult because I can't do these things.
Right.
And these are people who are successful. But on the inside, they feel, because they're not doing things that all grown-ups do in their mind, that somehow they're failing. It's that pervasive sense of failure that's very common.
Now then, my next question then would be specific, because again, coaching as a whole, but then if we can turn the lens ever so slightly to the ADHD factor, because I do know that that's what you specialize in terms of in terms of part of your background in your business. Do you find it similar patterns? Like if someone is identified as adult ADHD or even child ADHD, do you find that the traits, feelings are similar, or are they typically quite different?
Between non-ADHD and ADHD?
Yes. Yep.
The topic will be different.
Okay.
For example, someone might come and say that they're frustrated in their relationship
Okay.
because they're not spending enough time together and they can't make a decision about whether to stay or to go. But
Right.
there's no ADHD involved.
Right.
But the feelings of frustration, despair, fear are there. So the topic is different.
The
With
top.
ADHD, the topic is going to be around performance. It's going to be around remembering things, following through, organizing. But the
Yes.
feeling of despair, fear, frustration, all that's going to be there because we're all human beings.
And I think, and that is perfect. And where I want one to highlight is that the topics, yes, I imagine would be different, but sometimes in terms of my experience with adult ADHD and as a teacher by trade and working with students with ADHD who feel exactly like you've said, like a fraud. And this idea, I can't keep up with everybody else. Nobody realizes how much longer it takes me to be productive. Or a common thing I've heard and experienced is it takes me 5 times as long to do what someone else can do in
Yeah.
a day. And it's that energy, it's so draining for, let's just say, ADHD, without them even realizing that the person, let's say, that is, it's a non-neurodiverse or non-ADHD, is feeling the exact same way. They may be able to accomplish more in a day, but the feelings of isolation or despair or failure is actually the exact same. It's
Well, it
just that
is.
it looks different. It may look different,
Yeah.
but it's the same. So the commonality, I feel like, is so much more than we realize.
I'm really glad you brought that up because so many people with ADHD feel like they're different.
Yes,
And they are.
they are.
They
Right.
have a unique cluster, but they're human beings, and we all struggle with memory. We all
Yes.
struggle with those things. Only the thing that makes it ADHD is the degree to which your life is impaired.
Right. Absolutely.
You're not qualitatively different in the sense that you're an alien. You're not. It's just understanding how your brain works. And I do not mean to minimize how challenging it is to live with ADHD.
Yeah.
But I have a friend who's a therapist, and she's now working with a lot of clients with ADHD. Initially, she didn't recognize ADHD in her practice until I started talking to her. And I said, "Are you sure that client doesn't have?" And now she recognizes 50% of her clients probably have it. And it has completely changed the way she works. But to your point about that is that it's like a continuum.
Mm-hmm.
We're all human beings. We all have the same brain, our brains are different, but the basics are the same. And because we're human, our feelings of inadequacy or confidence and all of that is the same. It's
Yes,
just the trigger points may be different.
absolutely. And and I'm pretty obviously transparent. So my husband was diagnosed 2000, I think it was around 2013, in terms of that. And the process for support has been ongoing. And it's forever changing, even like this week, even last week, as our circumstances in life changed. So then we, had kids and changed jobs, and then we moved. So like the demands of life change, and he changes and I change, and trying to navigate what that looks like and what that means. And what I have learned in this process is networking. And so I shouldn't say networking, it's creating supports of network that are so, so important. Outsourcing as much as we can, things like that. And what I mean by that, I should clarify what I mean. So, if I have to hire a cleaning lady because we can't keep up, or we've identified that's not a strength of ours, or whatever. So it's whatever that looks like, or working with a different counselor or a life coach, or working with specific professionals outside of whatever it is that we need. So what I have learned in this process is that it is so unbelievably, I wouldn't even say important, I would just say necessary, to create this community of support. And as a teacher, my day cap, if you will, in getting my research done for this process and sort of these shows, I've really come to recognize how much more support is needed. And not like ADHD, yes, but in general, in terms of the demands of life, the landscape of our culture, just so much of it. As students, I think more outside support needs to come in. And as professionals, I think we are overwhelmed. I think we need support as well. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And I think we also sometimes in our professional fields, we try so hard, and we should, like we try really hard to create networks within ourselves. But I really am starting to really feel so much more strongly that we need to pull in outside networks. Yeah. So my question to you is, in terms of coaching within schools, I've had this idea, and then when we've chatted previously to this, you mentioned, and I did not know this, I didn't, that you've actually worked within schools. Mm-hmm. That is amazing to me. And I really am starting to believe so much more necessary in terms of perspective, motivation, in terms of that, hey, I'm coming in, I have nothing else to gain other than you being successful and productive. That sort of willingness to help, I think, is so much more imperative for all of us. And even the education of whether that's ADHD or challenging or other challenges, excuse me, as well. Having that outside person come in is, I think, very, very important. I'm repeating myself because, and I want to hear your perspective on it. So can you please tell us a bit how you got involved in the school systems and what that kind of looked like? Because I'm hoping to walk away from this and take some ideas and to my own board, to my own circles, and create some very serious conversations and dialogues about working with coaches more regularly within our school system, because I think it's necessary. So I would love to hear your perspective and your experience on that.
Oh, there's so much to say. I want to go directly first, though, to your point about speaking to your board. If you were going to focus on any one thing, and I've been saying this at cadre meetings, the Canadian ADHD Awareness Alliance and my colleagues there, that we really need to focus on executive functioning, whether or not you have ADHD, because that encompasses everybody. And in that way, you set up every single student to be able to navigate and transition from elementary into high school much more easily, transition again from high school into college seamlessly. Otherwise, these kids are going to crater every time there's a transition. But when we focus on executive functioning, holy cow, you are actually helping them develop the skill they need to get their homework done, tells them how to learn. They get to know themselves from the inside out. They learn how to advocate. It's everything.
It's everything.
And coaching in school, I totally hear you on this, Stephanie. My heart goes out to those teachers who care so much about what they're doing, and they don't know how to help a student who can't get their homework done.
Right. And
they know the student wants to get it done.
Absolutely.
They feel helpless to be able to support that student in actually getting it done.
Yes.
I've seen them in tears.
And I also want to say too, as an educator, that the intention is there and I want to, and we just get so bogged down. And it's not that, and I just feel like we have to get to a place where I openly and without shame just say, I can't do everything. Like I want to be, because I feel like an immediate response to sort of this idea of coaches within schools is, well, that's what a teacher is. And it's like, yes and no. It's like, I am there as a mentor, as a facilitator, as a teacher. I'm going to deliver the curriculum. I'm going to create the content. We are going to work together. I'm going to teach. Of course, I am also going to mentor. Of course, I'm also going to build, relationships, all those types of things. So yes, those things are still happening, but I also feel like we need to get to a point where we say, I do the best that I can for 34 people or 33 people, whatever my class size is, times 3 periods a day. It is not humanly possible that I can meet every single need with these students. And as much as I want to, and of course I want to, and we try our best, but we just can't stretch ourselves that much. And our students need it. And I think if we worked in tandem, that's my idea, is to work in tandem. And that, I think, it benefits me and them sort of collectively in terms of bringing in these supports and the big word I want to say too is consistently. So not like we have this once, a month, maybe a couple times a year. It's like, no. Consistency, I think, is really, really important as well. So
I really acknowledge your openness for that.
yeah,
That is amazing, because in a lot of the schools I've worked at, they were not open to that.
Yeah.
Because they felt that that was their role. But let's focus more on what could be done.
Yes,
When you asked me how I got there, I got into this whole field of ADHD when I realized my children were struggling in school. I never struggled in school, so I was really surprised. So I think my son was in grade 3, and I thought, there's something wrong. He can't do his homework. He's really struggling. So I asked the teachers, did an informal survey, and I said, how many of your students need remediation? 50% across a middle class elementary school, 50% needed remediation in this French immersion school. I was shocked. So I decided to do some research, and I set up an after school program that would help them do their homework, because the difficulty for these kids was not in the learning per se. It was taking the homework and knowing what to do with it meaningfully.
right.
So that was the first thing that I did. But long story short, eventually, when I found out my son had been diagnosed with ADHD, and I was looking for a program that actually addressed the attentional challenge, because tutors were great in elementary school because that would teach him to read and to do his math routinely, but that wasn't addressing the underlying executive problem.
Right.
Eventually, I found this clinical program affiliated with McGill, and that was a coaching program. But they didn't call it that. But that's what they were doing. They were pairing a high school student who was supremely at risk of failing,
right,
with a university student who'd been trained to understand learning disabilities and ADHD. And they met twice a week in the same place and in a group. So there was a social aspect to it. And these kids were not told by their tutor, they were called a tutor, but they weren't, what to do. They just watched them and then invited them to try something, just like a coach would. Oh, I'm noticing this. How are you feeling about that? The kids ended up acquiring strategies. They reflected. They became very self-aware. They started noticing, making links. Those kids passed high school.
right.
They would not have without that. And eventually I became a team lead in that program, then became the director of student success in a private college. And there I trained a team of 25 university students. And we had clinical meetings twice a week to follow up. How's your student doing? What's working? What's not working? Where's their level of awareness? So the success of that program was so startling. Within 1 year, the college enrollment doubled. Now it was a small stage up, but it doubled from 99 up to, 160 something. Well, that's not quite double, but you know what I'm saying.
Right.
So, and the parents paid for it. And that's the thing, Stephanie, is school boards go, no, too expensive. Can't do it. But parents were going to pay because there was no other place they could get that kind of support. Now, in terms of, coaches in the school, I did that in another private school, in a high school, because they had the vision, and they said, they gave me an office, and I met with the most at risk students, and I met with them once or twice a week. They gave me a room to do that, but I also met with teachers.
Yes.
We did big learnings together. And then the teachers would come to me and say, I'm really stuck. I don't know why this student is doing this. That was hugely valuable.
And I think part of this too, exactly what you identified, is that it was targeted in that it was specific. So your training, it was just specific to that need, versus in the public system, which I'm within, the funding, the resources, we try and get as much as we can to as many as we can, because we understand that we can't get to all of them. So then when we're going private and things can get more smaller and more specific, which is how it should be, of course, but then we get into affordability and accessibility, right? And that's what we want to take these successful programs that are out there. They exist. I'm learning that they exist. And then how can we create conversations and opportunity and connections and partnerships, and get them over to reach as many students as we can within our system. And again, I say students, I further mean that with older students, college students, young adults as well. I think it can only benefit more and more, right?
I'd like to see it fully integrated in the curriculum, because then you hit everybody and you don't have to have a separate program.
Yes.
And it's not that teachers need to do more, you do less, actually. And there are ways, for example, rather than telling a student, you have to get that in by here, it's how are you going to get that in?
Yeah.
What strategy do you need?
Yeah. And I've said this in other episodes as well. Regardless of the context, if we want education to remain relevant, and we want our place to remain relevant in that, which I believe we do, like we want to be there and we want to help. I think the only way that is going to happen purposefully is going to be collaboratively. And I think we need to start working with as many partners and communities as possible in a collaborative effort, versus this individualistic ideology that these are, my classroom, my students, my clients, my patients, I'll take care of it. This idea of the I versus the we, because our intentions are the same.
And it takes nothing away from your professionalism.
Absolutely.
At all.
Nothing. And it's like you said, it's not about creating more work. It's opposite. It's about sharing a load in order to achieve the best possible outcome, or the best possible result. And yes.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if it's really about sharing the load, or is it more about acknowledging that our school systems have to adapt?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
The universities need to be training in executive functioning and how to develop curriculum that does that automatically, so teachers do not have to work so hard at that. It's also the government recognizing, like they recognized autism. Absolutely. We have an issue in Canada with executive functioning, and it's a lot higher than 5%. So yes, the government needs to look at it that way and start funding these shifts.
I had a conversation with someone recently who is formally diagnosed with autism and ADHD, and spends their personal and professional career advocating for knowledge and support and resources of ADHD and autism within education. And while we were talking, they said, Stephanie, I stopped telling people in conversations that I have ADHD. I just say autism. And I say, why is that? And she goes, because Stephanie, people tend to get glossy-eyed and it kind of goes over when I say ADHD. They're like, oh yeah. But when I say autism, they tend to listen more inclusively. I have their attention. She's like, and that's first of all, that's something she's working towards, is creating that education and understand and sort of these, I don't want to say fads of terms, right? She's like, people are listening right now when we talk about autism, but we're not listening in the same way about ADHD. And it needs just as much attention and resources and funding. Like, it's not recognized the same yet. She's like, it will be. And we continue having these sort of conversations, and it will be. She's like, but it's something that I've definitely realized in terms of how I can make a splash in this field is in conversations, how I start my conversations first in order to get that attention. She's like, and she's recognized that. And I thought that was so interesting, because I thought, from my perspective in my field, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah. Like, yeah, I guess when someone, and again, prior to this whole experience, if someone says ADHD, I nod and I'm like, yep, absolutely. And I have a lot of experience with the term, as opposed to when I hear autism, I think, oh, okay. And then something flips in my head where I'm like, okay, I have to make sure I get, and then I just realized in terms of my own self-reflection and awareness, my approach changes, not intentionally, but an approach changes. And I thought when she said it, I thought that's interesting, because yeah, you're right. And that I need to work on that. Like I need to reapproach this, because yeah. And it's something that that's just been in the back of my head with this in terms of, I didn't even realize it. Right. And I'm very aware of the process and I live with it. And it's like, I didn't even realize I do that. But yeah.
I was talking to a friend of mine who is a pediatrician, and we had talked, how do we get an educational campaign out there where people start understanding what ADHD actually is? And you had asked me earlier in this conversation about what are the feelings and patterns that show up. I'm going to tell you a big one, because of what you just brought up, is trauma.
Absolutely. Yes. Big
There's a
component.
lot of trauma about from being misunderstood,
Yes.
misdiagnosed, judged.
Yes. And
It's
yes.
yeah.
Nope. I
The pain lasts into adulthood, and it continues to feed behaviors that are not helpful. It's completely unnecessary.
I want to ask, going forward, in terms of the idea of creating networks of support. So let's just say I'm on the pathway. I've been formally assessed. So I have my parameters and sort of better understanding. And now going forward, I want to create that network, that support. So I'm working with a counselor. Let's just say I'm working with a coach. I'm on, again, sometimes I think medications are very helpful. Some people are very against them. So whatever your parameter and comfort levels is, but let's just say there's other medications involved to help, which could be great. So I have things in place for my own advocacy, if you will, family, friends, all that goodness. Is there a way, out of curiosity, that they can sync? So what I mean by, or work in tandem. So what I mean by that, in working with a life coach and this idea of collaboration, could my life coach work with my or connect, communicate with my counselor? Like, can it?
With permission.
With permission.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just want to clarify something too. Now, I may not work the way everybody else does.
Okay.
Because of my background in a clinical program, but
okay.
I'm very holistic.
Yeah.
I look at your whole life. I look at you. It's not your ADD, although we get right into the minutiae, into the strategies for how to follow through and all of that. But it's including emotional regulation.
Yes.
The point at which I'll refer to a therapist is when the emotional dysregulation is interrupting our ability to move forward.
Okay.
That's when I'm going to refer to a therapist.
Right.
And often therapists refer to me when they've been working and the client is not able to show up. They're not making progress. They're still hitting the same walls.
Right. Okay.
So we go back and forth. Seldom, I'm thinking about times when we actually work together. We don't actually work concurrently very often because our roles will overlap to some degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
But sometimes we do, depending on the particular brand of ADHD, because some people have other diagnoses like bipolar or depression. If they're in an active depression, they're going to need to be seen by their therapist as well. But the people I am in community with are psychiatrists. I really want to find more psychiatrists in my neighborhood, because finding a good one who understands ADHD is absolutely critical.
Agreed.
Not everybody needs the medication right away, but because ADHD has so many comorbidities, it's really important that we're working with someone who understands it. Because a big part of my job, Stephanie, is when my clients come to me and they say, look, I went to my GP, they put me on this and it didn't work. And then, or for example, if they've got active addiction and the doctor refuses to put them on medication because of the addiction, they're afraid that the stimulant medication will be abused. But the research shows that you need to treat the addiction by treating the ADHD.
Wow.
So this is why in the community that I try to build in my practice is to make sure that I've got professionals there in the wings.
Yes. To create, and that's kind of where I was leading, in the sense that it's so important to have that, even that ability to communicate with one another. Right.
Yes.
And I think that's it. Like, that's the whole thing. And sometimes, and where I have felt in my own personal experiences is I have help over here, help here, trying. And then sometimes even that feeling of trying to manage it all, and then telling this person all about this, and then this person, and I'm repeating myself. And it's like, okay, so, but that ability to just communicate with permission, like you said, if that was something that practitioner, that psychiatrist, that coach could do it, like just communicate amongst each other, I think that would make also such a big difference too.
I'm a big believer in a team approach.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's important to have one person who's overseeing with you.
Okay.
And usually that can be a coach.
Okay.
Because you just said it. It can be really overwhelming. Do I go here? Do I go there? Do I do that first? How do I prioritize that?
Yeah.
It can be really confusing.
Amazing. Well, Lynda, okay. Oh my goodness, so much goodness, if you will. So before I go, because I know I've taken up so much of your time, but before I let you go, can you please tell the audience how they can get a hold of you, your services, and how they can get in touch?
There are two ways. You can email me directly at my email, info@Lynda Hoffman. I don't know if you're going to spell it out for them, but
I will.
it's
No, I will.
L-Y.
Yeah. So go ahead.
You
I'll
will?
put them all in the show notes. So, 100%. Yeah. So no, I
Okay.
will. Yes.
So it's at my email, or go to my website to the contact page and just fill out a questionnaire. Even though you don't want to work with me, you just want to connect, just fill it out anyway, and I will get back to you that day.
Lynda, thank you so much for this chat today. And I think you've mentioned a lot of very important things. And I do feel a bit more optimistic, if I'm being honest with you, in terms of the potential for community and support. And if we can have more conversations like this and more people willing, like more professionals coming together and willing to work together for the same goal, regardless of your stage of life. Like I said, whether you're an adult, student, young adult, it doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. It's a matter of just this concept of collaboration. I'm genuinely optimistic. I really am.
I am too. And I think that professional isolation is not useful for the professional or for the client.
Yeah.
And ADHD needs a multimodal approach. All the research says that. We know it already. We just need to get together.
Lynda, thank you so much, my friend. And we will chat very soon, I'm sure.
This was fun. Thank you.
A huge thank you to Lynda Hoffman for taking the time and talking with me today. I think the topic is so important, and creating circles of support and surrounding ADHD with as much resources as possible. And that may look different for every person. And whether that is medication, whether that is counseling, doctors, families, friends, coaches, or ideally it would be all of it, all rolled up together in one to create the best possible opportunities for success for that person. And with these conversations, it is truly my hope that people start to realize what options are out there in order to navigate the best pathway for themselves. For more information about today's episode, please check out www.thatsforcompany.com. To connect with me, please check out our social media platforms for all things ideas, feedback, books, food. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you again, everyone, for stopping in today, for sitting down with us and having what I hope is some pretty important conversations. And I hope we can chat again soon.